Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Portland, Maine Board of Education Finance, Operations, and Personnel Committee meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. on March 17th, 2025. Welcome. We are going to just broad strokes for this meeting. We're going to open up for public comment in a moment if there's any member of the community that wants to do that. We're going to hear some information from staff and then have discussion after that. I also want to make sure to acknowledge the folks who are here. Let's see. So I am the chair of the committee, and then members of the committee. We have Board Member Opperman and Board Member Lena. We also have Board Chair Lentz with us, and then we have a number of staff members. We have Superintendent Scallon. We have Senior Executive Director of Strategy, Dr. Warren. We have Executive Director of Communications, Dr. Valenzuela. And we have Director of Secondary Education. I'm so sorry if I'm messing up your title, Dr. Ahmed. And we have Deputy Facilities Director Watson. Okay, let's see if we have attendees that potentially might want to give public comment. Just as a quick note, if we have anybody who wants to give public comment, and we have somebody with a hand up, so I will be reading the rules of the road, the parameters and guidelines for public comment, so that everybody is on the same page. Okay, here we go. So a couple of reminders about public comment. Members of the public can speak on any subject directly related to the operations of the schools, except for personnel matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students, because those things have to be addressed through established policies and procedures. Each speaker who wants to give public comment is limited to a maximum of 3 minutes, 6 minutes for somebody who's using an interpreter. Individuals cannot relinquish a portion of their time to another speaker. Committee members will not respond to comments. This is a one-way, we're listening only. Speakers must refrain from engaging in disruptive conduct, including but not limited to using vulgar or obscene language, threatening others using words or by other actions, using pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factor, making defamatory comments, exceeding the allotted time limits, talking over or interrupting others, offering repetitive comments, offering comment on matters unrelated to the school district's programs, policies, or operations. If any public comment is contrary to these rules, we will stop it. And so having said all that, if you'd like to give public comment, raise your Zoom hand, and we will move you over so you can talk. I'll let you know when you can start, and I will also let you know when there's about 30 seconds left to go and when your time is over. And if you could please start your public comment with your name and where you live, that would be much appreciated. So we do have a couple of people, and I'm going to start with Suzanne. You should be able to unmute yourself now. And Suzanne, you're up.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sue Chevalier. I live in Buxton. I've been working in education positions serving young children for over 30 years. This is my 13th year in Portland Public Schools. I'm currently a pre-K dual language learner teacher, which means I serve students who are learning English as they also master their native language or languages. I currently work in 3 pre-K classrooms in 3 different buildings, one of which is a pre-K partner site, meaning that that Portland Public Schools contracts with a community early childhood program where Portland Public Schools public pre-K is housed. The students I serve in collaboration with my building pre-K teaching teams range from US-born students to new arrivals. Some have older siblings within Portland Public Schools, so their families have already made connections to our elementary, middle, or high schools. But some are the very first child in their family to enter Portland Public Schools. Some of my students are unhoused, some are under-resourced, Some are food insecure. Some have experienced trauma or live with family members who have experienced trauma and therefore likely experienced secondary trauma. If students on my caseload who attend a pre-K classroom in our elementary schools have challenges that are best addressed by a school social worker, the pre-K team engages the building social worker for help for the student and family. But for students who attend pre-K partner sites who have challenges best addressed by a social worker, there's currently no one in place to help. It's been a very unfortunate scenario this year that Portland Public Schools has been unable to hire someone to fill the half-time social worker position to serve some of our neediest pre-K students. I'm here tonight because I have grave concerns that continuing to fund the position only half-time rather than full-time will result in the same scenario continuing for next year, that Portland Public Schools will not be able to hire a part-time social worker for pre-K. And therefore, the pre-K students in elementary school buildings will get the support they need from building social workers, but those in partner sites will once again go without support. This would be most unfortunate. Pre-K is the first introduction to Portland Public Schools for many of our students and families. I urge you to consider funding the social work position for pre-K as a full-time position rather than a half-time position, to help ensure the best possible experiences and supports for our youngest learners. We want to launch them on the most successful path possible as they start their Portland Public Schools journey. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Sue. Next, we will move to Rachel. Oh. Rachel, go ahead.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, you can hear me. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rachel Suey, and I live here in Portland, in the West End. I, like Sue, am a pre-K DLL teacher, working with multilingual learners across 3 different classrooms at 3 different schools, 2 of which are school-based, 1 of which is a partner site. Similar to Sue, I'm here today to express my concern over the decision to maintain the pre-K social worker position for partner sites as half-time rather than expanding it to a full-time position. This position is for a social worker specifically for our partner site locations, which include 4 classrooms. Pre-K classrooms that are in the elementary schools have access to school-based staff for these kinds of services. However, our partner sites do not have the same access. As you may already know, and like Sue said, the half-time pre-K social worker position has been posted since September without success in hiring someone to fill it. The students who would benefit most from these services are among our highest need students who need consistent, dedicated support to thrive in their learning environments. We have students who have or are experiencing things that are largely out of their control and our control, like past trauma, homelessness, and food insecurity. Just to name a few, these students deserve a dedicated social worker who is qualified and who has adequate time to meet their needs. A full-time social worker would provide stable support, build stronger relationships with students and families, and allow for more proactive intervention rather than reactive responses. While there are many things that have happened to our students or that our students are currently experiencing that we do not have any control over, ensuring they have access to a full-time dedicated social worker is something we can make happen. These students are our youngest learners within Portland Public Schools, and they deserve the best possible start to their education. I urge you all to reconsider this decision. This investment is not just about filling a position, it's about giving our students the support they deserve. Thank you for your time and considering the best interest of our students.
Thank you, Rachel. I am not seeing any other Zoom hands. So I am going to close public comment. And now I will hand things over to Superintendent Scallon to walk us through some information that staff is going to present to us.
Yeah, good evening, and looking forward to continuing the conversation that we had started last week about potential adjustments that the Finance Committee may want to consider in relation to the FY26 proposed budget. Those are all proposals that the Finance Committee could consider, as well as others. And just in terms of the comments that we just had, just want to put into perspective that I think at this point, there aren't any decisions that have been made, right? And so we're not talking about reversing decisions or adjusting, but in fact, weighing the pros and cons of a number of really difficult decisions and considering whether or not the committee wants to make any changes before it goes back to the full board. And so no decisions have been made yet, but we're looking to get input from the committee tonight about changes that would then be put in front of the committee for a vote on the 24th. I'm going to share some slides here just to guide the conversation. Then I'll lose my screen there. And so, Chair Bryden, can you see those just because I can see you on my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great, perfect. So I'm going to do answers to the March 10th questions, provide just a quick review of the proposed budget and potential adjustments, and then open it up for you guys to have discussion with providing as much time as possible for that discussion. The questions that I want to run through, I have 3 slides of them, so I'm going to do them pretty fast. But happy to take questions if there are follow-up questions on them. So one of the questions we got was around temporary salaries. And so you can see there that the temporary salary category in the budget book includes tutor substitutes, teacher additional pay, regular support overtime, stipends and differentials, and retirement payouts. This year, we had a slight increase in the overall number of dedicated subs in the proposed budget, and the big jump was actually that in most of our schools, the dedicated sub position moved from being in the regular pay line into the temporary pay line. And so it was just a correction there. And so that's the big change there. The second question was around ops and comms and what's in that contracted service line. And so you can see there that it is purchase professional and technical services, professional services, computer lease, tech-related repairs and maintenance, software maintenance, postage, phone, internet connectivity, advertising, printing, binding, and photocopying. And so it has some contracted services, but it is mostly operational in nature. Third question we got, it was a revenue one, and it was around why we were not budgeting any revenue in the multilingual learner hardship funds. This is something that we received last year and received significant funding for. And so the reason that we are not budgeting for this in FY26 is that these funds were only available through the state's 24-25 supplemental budget. And we have received none of those funds this year and don't anticipate that there will be any of those funds in FY26. There is a category in state revenue that's called Other. You can see it, for example, on page 12 of the budget book. This is tuition that the state pays for students it places in Portland Public Schools when the parent does not reside in Portland. This is generally the case that takes place when students are under the supervision of DHHS. And so it is tuition for that. There was a question about the use of fund balance. So fund balance is something we have to be careful about. And we need to make sure that we don't become too dependent on the use of fund balance because it can run out. And so in FY24, we budgeted to use $3.6 million and use significantly less. In FY25, we budgeted to use 3.5, and again, don't anticipate using that full amount. And in FY26, we budgeted to use $3.9 million, with all of it non-reoccurring costs. And so being really careful to make sure that we're not using it for yearly operating costs, where if we couldn't continue it, it would make a significant hole in our operating budget. It's also the case that after this year, we see a decrease in our bond payments that are required because the pension bond obligation falls off. And I believe that is about a $2.7 million bond obligation. And so there's a little bit of that offsetting this, that we will not have to make that payment next year. There was another revenue question around tuition for public K-8 and tuition public K-12. This is tuition that is paid to the district, again, for out-of-district students. This is primarily for students associated with Baxter School for the Deaf. The tuition rate varies each year per student and by grade level, but it's between $13,000 and $14,000. There is a question, and Baxter is looking at potentially shifting its programming for this coming year and having different sites with perhaps the elementary school not being in Portland. This tuition is about $230,000, and so it's possible that we may see a slight decrease in our overall revenue. We budgeted $500,000 for Maine PERS reconciliation this year and another $500,000 in FY26. There was a question about whether this was high. The reality is that we are doing a employee by employee, former employee by former employee, and retiree by retiree review for their Maine PERS calculations. And that's for between 65 and 75% of our employees, as we estimate that they have at least one error between 1996 and 2023. And so it's significant and labor intensive. And so we do anticipate that is the right number. If it turns out that it is less than that, those will be savings that would be added back into the fund balance. And so it's not money that's lost, but we do think it's the right amount. There was a question about when we'll get final medical and dental premiums. This is something we discussed as a committee last week, and one of the reasons we're wrestling with potential trade-offs in the budget. We learned this past Friday that our dental premiums will increase by 5.97%. They were budgeted to increase by 6%. So there's really no savings there or increased costs. The difference is, I don't even think $1,000. We don't have final amount yet for medical. Last year, just to put this in context, we learned on April 3rd. And so we have pushed and asked again for an earlier date. And that is an ongoing discussion to see if we can get an earlier date. So far, they have not offered that. And so April 3rd, by the way, is not a lock date on which they've promised. But we are continuing to push for it, the information as early as we can. Enrollment and staff counts. Staff counts were provided throughout the budget book. There was a request for putting it all in one sheet, and so we did that on board docs. And then we also provided an enrollment count. We do suggest using caution when you look at the enrollment counts, just because there's a fair amount of noise that can exist when you look at a snapshot that is just from one year to the next. And that is because what we're really doing there is taking this year in March and rolling those classes forward. And we don't have any scientific way of saying exactly how many kids will come in kindergarten. And so it is not a perfect science to say this is the exact number, but instead we use it as guidance to know what is our estimate of what we'll have. And then we are able to adjust at the beginning of the year. And so, for example, we right now have schools where we know they'll be right on the cusp. And we have some schools that'll be right over the cusp of needing an additional teacher, and some schools that we estimate will be right under the cusp. And so school A will have an extra teacher, and school B will have one less teacher. And they'll hire in that way. And we may find that in August, we need to shift that teacher based on how the numbers played out, or we may need to add a teacher. And so that is something that we did this past year without any true challenge on it. But that's how we handled that. That is the piece around the last question there. And so those are the answers to the questions that we had from the committee this past week. And then just Wanted to provide a little bit of clarity on this question around the $500,000 reduction and the $1 million reduction. And I apologize because this is my fault for just not being as clear as we probably should have been. When we're talking about increases in property tax, we're talking about the tax rate, the mill rate, as well as the tax valuation or the property valuation of the property. And those two things are both changing next year. And so just the property valuation going up as we anticipate to $15,320 million, that results in an increase in our tax levy. So even if there was no tax increase, as you can see here in this top line, we would have an increased tax levy of $1,300,000. And so it changes just slightly, just slightly, what it means for a $500,000 reduction and a $1 million reduction. And so I just wanted to share that to make sure that we were really clear about that and to make sure that you were able to see how the total tax levy increase balanced with the budget book. And so the only change to this chart is showing it to you with the 26 estimated valuation, not the 25 estimated valuation. It's also worth noting that these are estimated and they're going to change because Portland is going through a total property revaluation. And so there's a couple of pieces that are moving as we're doing this. There was a little bit of discussion at the last meeting and a question I received around if we were to reduce the schools that had the early literacy ed techs and how we would make that decision. And so I wanted to share with you here where you can see by line, you can see the school, the number of kinder classes we estimate they'll have next year, as well as a snapshot of the student population by economically disadvantaged, multilingual learner, and McKinney-Vento, or students that are experiencing housing instability, as well as school capacity to take on the pilot. And so we thought of that as leadership change and instructional coach. And so we wanted to share this with you in case this helps you if you're thinking about adjusting the number of schools participating in the early lit pilot. And then this is the same summary you've seen, right? So just reminding you that the overall budget proposed is $171 million. And it has the targeted investments in music at the high school, the academic rigor and support at the middle schools, reading support at the elementary, and the significant investment in special education. And you can see that it would increase the school portion of the property taxes by 5.3%, the mill rate by 42 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, which would result in an increase in the median homeowner of $210. And then here is a quick summary of what we talked about for potential adjustments that the cabinet developed and then discussed with leaders. And so the top one shows the Foundation for Portland Public Schools, which is a significant sponsor of us, having looked through and identified another $64,000 they felt like they could fundraise and assume. Proposed reduction of $119,000 in academics, non-personnel. An adjustment in personnel for our registration team. The adjustment in early childhood, which was reducing the contracted services as we thought about preparing for taking on CDS and remaining at a 0.5 FTE for social worker. For human resources, it was to stop using TNTP for our staff survey and to use a different one, and to reduce our stipends. For IT and data, it was the potential of not continuing student hotspots. For multilingual, it was the elimination of the AmeriCorps contract and point 2 of the language access coordinator. For special education, it was reducing by 1 FTE for physical therapy and 1 FTE of occupational therapy, but increase contracted services. For facilities, it was to not add an additional evening custodian to provide support when somebody's out. That would leave us at 3. And to reduce by 1 FTE on the bus driver. And then you can see there, and on the next slide, if you were to think about other reductions, how to mentally sort of think about it, that any proposal around teacher, guidance counselor, social worker, sort of you can think in the back of your mind, budget-wise is about $99,000 for one person. An education technician is $61,000. An assistant principal is $125,000. At the central office or the department level, personnel are budgeted on their actual, and the non-personnel is all listed in the budget book. And while this is framed in reductions, it could certainly also be that the committee proposes investments and other additions or ways to think about this. And so, Chair, that is my update. And happy to take questions, but look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That was really good framing. I just want to also confirm that essentially the most helpful conversation among the committee for you as staff will be for us to sort of discuss what members of the committee would feel comfortable with in terms of potential changes to the proposed budget, both if it feels like the biggest question mark, the biggest variable is the health insurance premiums. So looking at this in terms of, okay, well, if it's exactly 6%, are we comfortable with what's been proposed? Because that basically means no needed changes. And if it's a lot more than 6%, what do members of the committee feel should be done in terms of, there's a few levers there. There's, changing the property tax rate change that we want to pursue. There's looking at fund balance, and there's also the adjustments and cuts that you laid out. So I just want to confirm, Dr. Scallon, that basically what you're looking for is to watch us committee members and board chair Lentz. Also, I believe I had seen that board member Noor had joined. Yes, great. So we have the whole committee here. But Dr. Scallon, I'm looking to confirm that the most useful conversation for us as committee members to have right now is that sort of analysis of if it's a 6% increase for the benefits, how do we collectively feel about what's been proposed? And if benefits are going to cost a lot more than that, how do we on the committee feel about what to do about that? Is that correct?
I think that's right. And I think that will best help us make sure that we are able to give you the full picture for your vote next week. Okay, wonderful. Board member Lena, go ahead.
Thank you. Can we have a dollar amount for like the max, if the premiums came up at 18%, how much more in dollars would that be?
So the best way to think of it is that for every 1 percentage point above 6% is $110,000. And so 12 percentage points is $1.32 million. And the benefits increasing 18% is possible but unlikely, correct? I don't think I can, I don't think I have anything that would state that.
Okay.
The one thing I would give, I don't know if it's caution, but just additional color is that one of the ways that our benefit costs are controlled is that for this year, the max that the teacher benefits can go up is 3 percentage points higher than what it was this year. That's what their contract says. Is so anybody who's in the PEA, the max increase is 3 percentage points. That said, the following year, we absorb that cost. And so last year it went up 5.3 percentage points. And so we paid 3% and the members paid 2.3, or the teachers paid 2.3. This year, we will pay 3 percentage points for the increase plus the 2.3 that they paid, if that makes sense. And so, so just in the back of your mind, you can think about it of like this year, we don't have to incur it, but next year we will have to incur it.
Okay. And to sort of frame Board Member Elena's question, maybe in different words, but I think getting at.
So the $110,000,
Yeah.
$110,000, the 1.32 is
Yeah.
a fiscal year 26 cost.
Yeah.
Our teaching staff is, and our PEA members are more than half of our staff.
Mm-hmm.
And so in fiscal year 27, we would assume that there would be a significant benefit increase 1 year later.
Okay. And for the purposes of moving this budget through the process and getting it to the full board, that's good context, but it doesn't necessarily drive any potential adjustments that we might make for FY26, correct?
That's correct. Except you just have to keep in the back of your mind that you have that coming, right? So it's a little bit like thinking that you have a payment that you have to make in the future.
Yep. Okay. Okay. That is very helpful. What questions, initial gut check comments or concerns do folks want to start with? Board Member Opperman, go ahead. You are muted.
Not a bad thing usually. On the same discussion that Member Lena brought up, what might and how Dr. Scallon explained it, that we would be definitely putting that 3% on. If it was more than 3%, the teachers would pay the rest this year. Is that correct? And then we would incur it, pay the teachers back the following year.
So we would not pay it back. We would then incur that increase the following year, right? So benefit increases always add on to it. So if you imagine it's $100, okay?
Yes.
This year, if there's a 6% increase, okay, just to keep this really simple, we would pay $103 and they would pay $3. Next year, we have to pay $106 for their premium, plus up to 3% increase on the 106. And they would pay whatever additional increase on top of that. And so that's how it works. It just works out as a sort of like budget piece that's really helpful, recognizing how late benefits come out, so that from a budget end, you're able to know, well, the cap is for teachers that percent.
Okay, so that, I guess, because my thought is as a delayed incurring it at a later time, and we have the pension situation going away in that time, is that a thought to say that we may not be in as dire a strait in a year, or they are irrelevantly related? You know what I mean?
I think it is a piece of it, right? There's a lot of factors on which you can weigh, right? So the use of fund balance increased. And one of the ways that we think about the use of fund balance is that we're using it for non-reoccurring costs and that we have the pension bond obligation coming off. If we also use the pension bond obligation coming off to help with the thought around the teacher benefits, right? We can't use it for too many things.
That's so, okay, so then we would be then basically jacking up our costs anyway in the future because we don't want to keep doing that. Okay, that's understandable. I guess so, one of the discussions of what you just said, 1.3 million is a possibility, which would put our tax rate over 6%. If we were to keep what we have now and then just deal with it, whatever comes along, we would then be putting a over 6% increase on 6% on the tax rate. So I think we should consider seriously, thoughtfully, some places that we could decrease the 5.3% in such a way that perhaps we can reinstate something, as time goes on. Those are my thoughts on it. 5.3 is a reason. I think it's reasonable. Some people will not. So say anything over 5 is unreasonable. So that's the population. And I think that we need to be thoughtful of that and try to determine what areas we could adjust that doesn't hurt our students in our desire to improve their schooling, because that's one of the things we keep looking for is to improve the reading, improve their academic, improve their social skills. And if we cut so much from those kinds of pieces, we may be saving tax dollars, but we're not doing any good for the school district as a whole because we're not producing encouraging more educated individuals. I guess that's how I could say it. So that's my thought right now. I have some thoughts on other stuff, and I would just let someone else speak at this point.
Well, actually, so I actually want to follow up on what you were saying, Board Member Opperman, and get a sense, acknowledging that we are just having a discussion, and a week from tonight is when we'll be voting on any possible adjustments. But I wanted to get your thoughts on if, and it's a very big if, but if benefits come in at 6% as projected, what's your comfort level with the proposed budget as it currently looks?
It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay. I still think in the process, I think it would be wise for us to look at, most at the budget and think of places that, however small, with minimum hurt to anything. But basically, I would stick with the 5.3, 5.2%, kind of thing if we could. And anything can help.
Yep. For what it's worth, I will say from that list of adjustments and potential cuts, I think that the foundation for Portland Public Schools line item makes sense to do either way. I don't know that it'll bring us down to 5.2. It's just $60-something thousand. But to your point about finding opportunities where we can, I don't recall there being a downside from our conversation last week on that line item, whereas most of the others, maybe the TNTP survey one, in terms of where the trade-offs are, and pretty much everything on that list was like, well, you could make that decision, but then there's a downside to it in terms of impacting students and services. I
would be interested to know from Dr. Slavic that whether changing to the other plan would upset the apple cart.
You want to know if changing the survey from TNTP to
an in-house one?
It wouldn't be in-house in terms of the questions. So we would use a survey that is also nationally normed, but it just happens to be that they provide their questions. And so they are available. It would be administered by staff, which we now have a lot more capacity to do. One of the things TNTP will not give us any data that is not scrubbed and completely unverifiable. And so I think there would be general staff happiness to not have TNTP. I think there's mixed feelings about that. I think that there would be some caution about not having it administered by an outside party.
Okay, thank you.
Other thoughts, questions, responses?
Well, looking at the list, unless somebody else wants to say something, I will defer.
Go for it.
Okay. Looking at the list of suggestions, there are a couple things that I would not want to cut. And one is that social worker for the preschool. I think keep getting it to one would make it, we could get one because it'd be a real salary that somebody would be able to work with. Half time, unless you have, a peculiarly wonderful setup, doesn't work for most people. So I think that piece I wouldn't want to cut. I would not want to cut all of the reading help in kindergarten. That list of saying what the stability level is, I don't know what the judgment of stability of leadership and not how that would affect the kindergarten population in having extra ed techs. I mean, is it better in a place where they're losing leadership to have more ed techs, or is it a hindrance to running the show? That'd be something I don't know which would go in what direction. If we were to cut any of those 6 down to say 3, which would save 3 times, a couple $100,000, just under a couple $100,000. So, thoughts?
Yeah. The other thing that I made a note of on the slide where we were talking about the impacts by rate to a median homeowner with a house of $500,000 value, I jotted down that, if we made $500,000 worth of cuts, it essentially is $16 to a homeowner with a $500,000 house. So to me, I'm really cautious about that cost benefit analysis and that trade-off, that list of, potentially that much in cuts really will have big impacts. And I'm not sure that, a household saving $16 over the course of a year is a good trade-off personally. Board Member Lena, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to share that I am really appreciative of the addition of the 2 music teachers to the budget. I think that's really important. I really wish we could do more, and I think it's a great starting point. So that's something that I want to make sure that we keep in. I know it wasn't proposed as something to remove, but I just wanted to acknowledge how important that is. And I did want to say we've been hearing a lot about a lack of custodial work being done or vacancies. And so to remove a custodial position seems like not a great move to me. And similarly with the buses, I know that we have had this rotating this vacancy that's just been constantly open, but it's something that we do need to fill. So that, again, also doesn't feel good to me to remove that as a budget item. And I think it's really important that we are increasing the support in kindergarten. I've worked as a kindergarten support person here and there, and it's so important. Those kids need a lot of support. The teachers need the support. And the fact that we're willing to do that program for our students and our staff, I think is a great step. And I wouldn't want to see that removed in any capacity. I think we need to do it at the highest capacity that we're able to with this budget.
So, Board Member Lena, if I can actually, so not to put you on the spot, but for the purposes of conversation, I have a follow-up question for you.
Sure.
As well. So, in the in the event that we see health insurance premiums have gone up significantly, and they are a lot more than 6%, I'm curious about your comfort level for what other levers you would feel comfortable using in terms of getting to a place where we can move a budget onto the full board.
I guess my question, I know I asked the question about the dollar amount, but I don't know that we saw that in terms of the amount that it would cost each individual homeowner. So I think that would help me with that decision.
You mean like, so are you,
Like if-
I want to make sure I understand. So are you saying, for example, you would be interested in better understanding if it was a 6% increase instead of 5.3, what would that mean for for a median homeowner? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, or even if it came in at the highest possible increase,
Yeah.
what that would do to the overall budget, to the tax rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be helpful to be able to make that choice.
To speak in specifics rather than hypothetical generalities. Yeah. Okay. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Can I answer that question real quick?
Of course.
So, if we assumed that it was again, this isn't like, we don't have an ability to say right now, here's the absolute high, but let's just put it at 9%. Okay. A 9% increase is almost exactly $1 million. And so if you look at that slide in the slide deck that has the property tax adjustment.
And just to be clear, you mean 9% increase in benefits?
Yep. So from 6% to 15%. So 9 percentage points higher. It is just about a $1 million increase. And so the way to think about that is if you look at that slide that has the property tax increase, that is the converse of a $1 million reduction. And so $1 million increase would increase the assessed value by the property tax, by 7 cents per $1,000, which would be $32.64 per person. So that's about what you're talking about. In terms of that increase. So just wanted to share that just so you had it.
And so those back of the napkin numbers are what it would look like if, as a committee and a board, we decided to see a 15% increase in health insurance premiums for our staff and put that all, in cause that have the property taxpayers absorb that and not change in any other way the proposed budget.
That's our estimate. Yes.
Okay. Board Member Opperman, go ahead. Thank you for your patience.
I have two questions then. One, just to follow up what you were talking about. That means right now, I don't have it in front of me. What was the percent? How much would it cost as stands, everything even? What was the increase per year for a taxpayer? This with the 5.3%. So the increase would be an additional 210 on top of what they're already paying. And if we were to have another million, it would be closer to 200 and...
It'd be 49 cents or 242.
Okay. So...
That's on a $500,000 house.
Right. So, and I'm just thinking, people, that's $250 a year for some people is a big increase. So it's just I know we're talking about, marginal increases if we choose this or do that or the other. I just want to acknowledge that $250 would be a potentially huge. $200 is big for a lot of people, even with a $500,000. I mean, some people who have $500,000 houses bought it for $10,000 and their Social Security is not what a person's Social Security would be right now. So those are or God knows if we have Social Security. So there's those pieces. The other question, completely different, is I noticed that there was a vice assistant principal position brought up as a potential cut. And I didn't know if we had anybody who was retiring at this point and at what level. And that was my question, why that was there. I mean, it's kind of interesting thought.
So I don't know of anyone that was put there to, again, provide comparison
Okay.
and markers. There was at least one board member in a discussion that raised a question about that. And so, again, just trying to be really transparent and share for both investment questions as well as potential reductions, so that you had a back of the napkin idea of what something was budgeted at.
Okay, thank you.
Board Chair Lentz, go ahead.
Just a couple of thoughts. First, I'm kind of staying out of the process here, just so that you as a committee can get where you need to be. But just wanted to again highlight, especially because Damon isn't here tonight, the tax programs, the tax relief programs, both at the city and state level that are underutilized by aging populations, which do provide some relief around the tax burden. So when we think about that, also remembering that there are programs that are set up right now. And I know that there's conversation about making the age on those even lower. I think right now the ones for aging folks are set at 62 years old, but there's also the homestead exemption and other things that just bring down the amount of taxable income on your or taxable value on your property. And then I wanted to go back to the and there's a page on the city's website that gives a ton of information about those. I wanted to go back to the hotspot piece because I've just heard several things in the community about eliminating all hotspots. So can we just go through again what that cost savings would actually be from? Is it eliminating all the hotspots? Is it managing them differently? Because we do know that those are used by a lot of our students, or at least were during the pandemic. And I assume that they're still being used for housing insecure young folks or people that just don't have access to the internet at home.
Yeah, so I want to be Chair Lentz, to your question, I want to be clear that on the proposals we have up here, there's none of them that we're like, yes, let's do, right? There's reasons that they were included in the initial budget. And I also think that we wrestled with and didn't try to put up a straw man of a false piece either. So we have hotspots. And we have a contract with T-Mobile to provide hotspots that allow students that don't have stable internet access to be able to access them. I don't know the exact number. It is quite complex to manage the contract and providing them and then getting them back. And so it's really the equipment, right, which is not big, right, probably smaller than the cell phone. As well as the contract that goes along with it for monthly service. And so it's not for staffing, it is simply that. And so right now, we don't have the capacity to effectively manage it. And so we have them, we just don't effectively manage it. We would probably be better off if we worked with our city partners, so that where our students are housed, if they're housing unstable, that we are working to get them internet service there through other means than hotspots. That's not a perfect answer, right? And we'd probably still have some hotspots that are needed, but we could probably cut it down. And so that would be working with the homeless shelter around what level of internet access they provide. It could be about looking at our Chromebooks and putting a Ethernet card in them. There's not great solutions, but that is what it is.
As a follow-up to that, I'm curious about, so it sounds like there's a number of different ways to get at the issue of, some of our students not having reliable internet access. Ethernet cards and things like that. For the purposes of this conversation, is it essential, like if we were to use that line item as a path to some sort of dollar amount savings in the budget, does that then close us down from being able to use the other alternative? Is it basically like this line item in the budget is not necessarily just hotspots, but broadly speaking, helping students get online when they need to?
No, I mean, this would significantly shrink it. We
Right.
would probably look at funding that we have, and to see if we could use some of our grant funding or other funding sources to get at.
Okay. Which sounds like,
we'd be shifting it out of our local budget
yeah,
to other ways.
which sounds tricky and less reliable.
Yeah.
Okay. And I apologize if you said this already and I missed it, but how many students are currently being helped in that way?
I don't have that number.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
On me.
Okay. Board member Lena, go ahead.
I just had a question about the timeline in terms of this process. I know that next week, as a committee, we're voting on this to send to the full board, and that we won't have the number for the benefits increase. So if, for example, we decided as a committee that we would be okay with, a 9% increase in the benefits, absorbing that, how would we propose what budget we would like to move forward if we don't have that number? What's the process around that?
I mean, chairs, I'm happy to defer to you. I'm also happy to offer an opinion. Which is my recommendation would be that you as the committee have really gotten the first bite at this and the opportunity to discuss it. And so I would recommend that when you vote next week, that you vote on a budget, because you're really voting on the tax increase and the general structure, and that you provide a overall recommendation to the board, right? So imagine something that said, we're voting for this as it currently stands or with these adjustments. And we recommend we take this posture about benefit changes. That's how I would recommend it. Knowing that the board will then get to discuss it on April 1st and hear from the committee and what you wrestled with, have an initial discussion, and then a vote on the 8th. And so I think that's the best way to do it, knowing that it'll then move a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And it is also possible that we might have the benefit increase information by the 24th, correct? I mean, that could happen.
It's possible.
Okay.
I wouldn't bet on it.
Okay. Okay. No, that makes sense in terms of having, so a week from today, as a committee, we will look at the information we do have, and, make any adjustments that we want to make based on the information available to us at that time. And then, follow the process, to move the budget forward to the full board, again, as Dr. Scallon was indicating, potentially with high level recommendations for what to do in various situations. Board Chair Lentz, was there anything you wanted to add to that overall?
Just to make sure that it's still clear that this committee can, once it moves back to the full board, you can still participate in creating other recommendations and amendments.
Yep. Good addition. Thank you. I want to acknowledge that, excuse me, I'm not getting from I'm not getting from the conversation any great appetite to let's identify things to cut. I'm not getting, a strong desire to analyze and really dig into which items from that list are on the chopping block. And I just want to open up, if I'm reading the room incorrectly, I invite committee members to speak up and say, "Oh no, you've completely misunderstood." But I'm getting the sense that we are collectively not excited about taking staff up on any of those items to cut other than perhaps the foundation. $60,000, yeah, drop in the bucket right there. But again, I'm going to take a beat and let anybody sort of chime in if I'm misreading. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
I guess, no, I think pretty close. I think you're pretty close. There were a couple things in conversation that there was a cut to an access coordinator, I believe, as one thought, and which was a time-ish situation. I wouldn't. I better just. There were a couple things that seemed maybe, and like you said, marginal. They're very marginal, but as we go into this, it's difficult. I'm worried about the SPED. I mean, there is the situation. I think I need to ask the question maybe about OT and PT. How many students are accessing that? And if we did not get those two individuals, we cut those from the budget, which is a couple $100,000. What would the impact be? Now, I mean, do we have students that are not getting PT and OT right now? I guess would be the question. I have with how many we have, and is the addition of an OT and a PT and I really want to push SPED positively, but is it something that is that a couple $100,000 that could be a piece of an adjustment? So that was one of the ones I had thought about earlier, and I hadn't brought it up yet. So that was a piece. I also got my email from Portland Foundation to donate. I don't know if you all have gotten out of yours yet, but donate X number, please right now, donate X number of dollars to help cover this budget. So, that will, I'm not worried about their money. I think they will come through with that, which is lovely. But what's the thought on the PT and the OT? Nobody has a thought on the PT.
So I just want to clarify, it's the question to Dr. Scallon about the PT and OT line item, like if the committee and board decided to avail ourselves of that, would it mean kids not getting PT and OT services in a harmful way? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay.
So we can get you, Dr. Opperman. I haven't had a chance to connect with Jesse Applegate since our conversation on Saturday. I haven't had a chance to get the numbers from him yet. We will get that and share that with you this week.
Okay.
We wouldn't propose the adjustment if it meant that we would not be able to service students. Okay. The reality is that it's really difficult to hire related service providers at the numbers that we're talking about already. And so part of it's that reality and knowing that we need to shift sometimes to contracted. So that's one piece. The second is that we stretch our people. And so I think this is also about recognizing that and being able to make it more manageable. And so would it be better for, I think it's 9 PT and 3 OT that we have right now? I could have the numbers reversed in my head, but I think that's right. Would it be better and more manageable for their caseload if we had that 10th? Yes. And so that's the piece that I think this is really about, and helping to reduce turnover and to make it better, and also not stretch them.
Got it. Thank you.
So it is 7:08. We theoretically have 22 more minutes before the scheduled end of our meeting. I don't want to keep us here just for, just because the meeting is supposed to end at 7:30. If there is not productive discussion to be had. I did just want to give folks also an opportunity to voice anything that they might feel needs additional investment. So, and of course, the follow-up question would be, and then what's your suggestion on, how to offset that cost-wise? Are there any areas where you feel like the budget does not have sufficient investment, and you would want to discuss changing it in that way? That looks like there's nothing jumping out there, which also tells me that the proposed budget is pretty spot on. I want to really express my gratitude to Ryan and your whole team for putting together a budget that is really targeted, and really strikes a good balance between efficiency and serving students. And I just I want to express my appreciation for how effectively you and the team have done that.
I agree 100%. And I noticed at each school building, kept it as low as possible, 3%, 6%, very, very lean needs requests anyway. I don't know if I was just looking at the chat, and there was a question there from member Noor. So I don't know if that had been addressed. And
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. It's the same question.
Hotspots. Yep. Yep.
Of which I'm working to get an answer. Chair, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So in any budget, as we continue to have it air and have people interrogate it, we continue to find little things that are adjustments. And from a budget end, they're really not significant in overall dollar, but they're little corrections we need to make.
Sure.
And so an example of that is that we have in the custodial space a couple of positions that are wrongly labeled. And so we just need to clean that up. And so if it's all right with you, we would like to bring that to the committee next week, just for transparency and clarity's sake. Again, they will not have any significant change in the bottom dollar, but don't want it to be anything where you feel like there's any significant changes.
Yeah. Can I ask I want to just confirm two things that I think are true.
Yep.
First, you're basically wanting to make sure that the committee has, that we have in front of us, a very up-to-date, as accurate as possible, very detailed, accurate budget on which to vote. Correct? That's what you're getting at.
Let me give you like a very concrete example. The LICEF head custodian position is listed in the budget book as a BC3. It should be a BC4.
Okay.
It's very minor, except to that individual, to which it is significant, and it should be appropriately indicated as such.
Sure. Yep.
And so that's the example.
Yep. And so my second follow-up question, confirmation point, is to just confirming something that I think is true. The nature of that edit or that update revision, the nature of that change any other time of the year would just happen because a budget is an estimate. And some things come in higher, some things come in lower. And the only reason why that level of detail needs to be brought to this committee is so that we can vote on a budget. But that type of adjustment any other time of the year just happens as part of staff doing your collective jobs, correct?
100%. Outside of April, after April 8th, this would just happen. And we wouldn't even really discuss it. Right? You'd obviously know, but it would not be a significant thing. But just wanted to be transparent as we're in that hyper focus right now.
I appreciate it. Yes. Okay.
Great.
Wonderful. We might actually end early because it looks like conversation has wound down, but I'm just to belt and suspenders, gonna give it another beat, see if anybody has any other comments that they want to make. Okay, then I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Board Member Opperman, and second from Board Member Lena. Show of hands for adjournment. It is unanimous. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Enjoy the extra 17 minutes of your day, and have a lovely evening. Bye, everybody.